The storm had turned the world white. Wind cut across the open plains like a saw blade, shredding sound and sense, leaving only cold and silence. Eli Dawson pushed his horse through the drifts, jaw clenched, breath turning to frost on his beard. He hadn't slept in a day and a half. Hadn't eaten much longer than that. He was riding on nothing but stubborn will and the hope he could reach town before the cold finished what life had already started. Then he saw it. A hand. Just fingers at first. Pale as carved bone. Reaching up from the snow like someone trying to claw their way out of grave. Eli froze. In this storm, saving her meant dying. But riding on meant letting her die alone. What kind of man chooses that? Eli swung down from his saddle, boots sinking past his ankles into the powder. The cold knifed through him instantly. His coat, already stiff with frost, did little to stop the bite. He stumbled the last few feet and knelt beside the hand. Snow piled over his gloves as he brushed it away, working fast, breathing hard. More appeared. A slender arm, a shoulder, a head with long black hair frozen into a brittle sheet of ice. The face beneath it was smooth and young, no more than 20, her skin a sickly pale under the frost. Her lips were blue, eyes closed, still as death. But Eli leaned close, pressing his cheek to her mouth. There, a whisper of warm air brushed his skin. She lived, barely. His horse stamped behind him, uneasy in the blinding wind. Eli looked back at the animal, then at the worn wool blanket tied behind the saddle, the only thing keeping him alive. He'd lost most of his supplies when a gust knocked his pack from the trail the previous night. Lost cattle in the storm before that. Lost too many other things long before winter came. He had maybe 3 hours left in him. 3 hours before the cold took his life. He looked back down at the girl. She had minutes. Eli exhaled, watching the breath tear away in the wind. Every sensible part of him screamed to cover her with snow, for insulation, and ride for help. But help was 8 miles south, 8 miles of drifting, hungry cold. She wouldn't last an hour. Probably not even half that. He had no choice. Not one he could live with, anyway. Eli yanked the blanket free from his saddle. The wind hit him like a broken blade, slicing through his coat, straight to bone. Cold fire raced across his skin. His breath hitched in his chest. He forced himself to ignore it. He wrapped the blanket around her small frame, tucking it tight under her chin. Her body was frighteningly light when he lifted her, like she'd been carved from hollow ice. Her head fell against his chest. He could feel nothing through his numb arms, but he imagined her faint warmth like a candle behind glass. Getting her onto the saddle took time he didn't have. His fingers were losing strength, dull, clumsy, refusing to bend. When he finally climbed up behind her, pulling her close, he felt the cold seep deep in his ribs, as if the storm were crawling inside him. He took the reins. He whispered to the horse, "Come on, boy. Not for me. For her." They pushed into the storm. Snow battered them. Ice stung his exposed cheek. His eyes watered from the wind until he could barely see. He kept checking her breathing, his face near her hair, listening for the faint rise of her ribs. For a long stretch, he wasn't sure if he heard anything at all. Then the storm thickened. The world vanished. What had been swirling snow became a white wall that swallowed the horizon. The horse slowed, fighting drifts that came to its belly. Eli leaned forward, urging the animal on, but his voice was thin, drifting away with the wind. His hands had gone completely numb. His legs stopped trembling. That scared him most. Shaking meant he still had warmth to lose, still had life to give. Stillness meant the cold was winning. The girl slumped heavier against him, her head rolling with each step. He checked her breath again. Nothing. For one horrible moment. Nothing. Then a thin sigh touched his cheek. He nearly cried from the relief. But tears would freeze in seconds. He pushed onward. After another mile, maybe more, his vision blurred. Snow and sky twisted together. His body felt wooden, stiff, foreign. He couldn't feel his feet, couldn't feel his hands. His thoughts came slow. We're not going to make it. He murmured a prayer he barely remembered. One his mother used to whisper beside an oil lamp on long winter nights. Then he saw it. A cabin. A small shape in the white. smoke rising in a thin line, fragile as a thread of hope. He steered the horse toward it, clinging to consciousness with raw stubbornness. When they reached the door, Eli tried to swing down, but collapsed, knees slamming into frozen earth. The girl sagged in the saddle, limp as wet cloth. He forced himself up, staggered to the door, and pounded with a fist gone white from frost. "Help, please," the door opened. An old man with sharp eyes and a rifle stood in the warm glow of a lantern. The heat pouring out felt like salvation. "Good Lord," the old man muttered, catching sight of the girl. "Bring her in, son. Now." Eli didn't need to be told twice. He half carried, half dragged her inside. The warmth hit him like a blow, so sudden it made him dizzy. He dropped to his knees beside the fireplace while the old man threw blankets down, stoked the fire, shoved more logs on until flames roared high. "She's Chinese," the old man said softly, not unkindly. "Don't see many out here." "Found her buried," Eli rasped, barely breathing. The man grunted. "She's got fight in her then. Most folks be long dead." They worked over her together, slow warming of hands, feet, face. Eli's fingers hardly worked, but he did everything he could, rubbing her hands, whispering things he wasn't sure she could hear. Time passed without meaning. Then she gasped. Her eyes opened, dark, confused, frightened. She tried to sit up too fast, collapsing back with a soft cry. She stared at them like cornered prey. "Easy," the old man soothed. "You're safe." She whispered something in Chinese, then tried in broken English. "Please, no hurt me." Eli leaned closer. "We won't." Her fingers shook as she clutched the blanket. "What's your name?" he asked gently. She swallowed. "Lun Mei." The old man's brows lifted. "Little Plum. Pretty name." Lon May's gaze darted toward the window where the storm beat against the glass. Then she whispered the words that changed everything. "I was hiding." "Hiding from what?" Eli asked. A gust of wind rattled the walls, but beneath it, another sound rose. "Hoofbeats." "Many." Lon May's face drained of color. "They found me." The old man grabbed his rifle. "Trouble." Lon May nodded, trembling. "If they find me, they kill me. They kill you too." Outside, the riders drew closer. Inside, 3 breaths hung in the warm air, heavy with fear. And in that moment, Eli Dawson realized that giving away his last blanket was only the beginning of what he'd lose tonight. The hoofbeats grew louder, muffled only by the storm as they circled the cabin. Eli moved to the window, wiping frost from the glass with a trembling hand. He saw shadows moving. 5 riders, hunched low in the blizzard, their silhouettes dark against the blowing white. His stomach dropped. These weren't travelers. They were hunters. The old man, Barrett Whitlow, though he'd only said "call me Whit," checked the rifle again, jaw clenched tight. Men riding in weather like this means they ain't right, or they ain't here for anything good. Lon May pressed her back to the wall, pulling the blanket tight around herself like she could disappear inside it. Her eyes were wide, shimmering in the firelight. You must let me go," she whispered. "If they find me here, they kill you. They kill everyone who helped me." Eli shook his head. "No one's killing you. You don't know them," she said, voice trembling. "These men, they take girls from railroad camps. Make them work. Hurt them. If girls run," she swallowed. "If girls run, they hunt them down." Whit cursed under his breath. "I knew some camps out here were bad, but I never thought." Lon May flinched as a shout rose from outside. A harsh voice, rough and accented, cut through the storm like a blade. "Little bird, come out now, and your friends die quick." Lon May's knees buckled. She slid down to the floor, covering her mouth to muffle a cry. Eli knelt beside her, steadying her shaking shoulders. "Look at me." Her eyes lifted, dark, terrified, pleading. "We're not handing you over," he said softly. She shook her head. "You'll die. They kill you slow." Eli's breath came out in a fog. "Then we'll make it difficult for him." Whit moved to the door and slid the wooden bar into place. "Windows are small. Good for us. Bad for them." The riders circled again. Eli heard their horses snort, heard boots crunch in the snow as some of them dismounted. One walked up to the cabin wall. Another stomped near the window, shadows moving just on the other side. The voice called out again. Eli Dawson. The name hit Eli like a hammer. Lon May looked at him in confusion. They know you. Eli stiffened. He recognized the voice. A memory crawled up his spine like cold water. Whit looked over sharply. You know him? Eli didn't answer right away. Not well, he muttered finally. But enough. Outside, the voice rose again, mocking, cruel. Come on, Dawson. You know me. Let's talk like old friends. Whit scowled. Doesn't sound friendly. Eli's jaw tightened. His name's Hal Lin. Worked the tracks. Mean as a rattlesnake. Ran with a bad crew. I had trouble with him once. Trouble? Whit pressed. How cheated a man out of wages? Beat him half to death after. I stepped in. Got a knife across my arm for it. Eli's gaze darkened. I guess he remembers. Lon May's breath hitched. Hal Lin served Chun. The name fell heavy. Chun, the man she feared most. The cabin grew colder despite the fire. Outside, Hal laughed, a sound full of teeth. You got something that's ours. A girl. Small thing. Little bird. Bring her out now, or we take her from your corpses. Whit chambered around. He's got all the charm of a wet boot. Lon May crawled toward the back wall. Please, there another way? A window? A hole? Anything. No back door, Whit said. Only way out is straight through them. The wind dropped for a heartbeat, and in the hush that followed, Eli heard something that turned his blood to ice. Footsteps. Right under the window. The faint sound of a gun being cocked. Down, Eli hissed. He grabbed Lon May and pulled her to the floor just as the window shattered. A bullet tore through the air where her head had been. Whit swung his rifle up and fired back. The blast shook the cabin. A man outside grunted and fell into the snow. Got one, Whit muttered, but the others weren't retreating. More shouts rose. More boots pounded through drifts. Firelight flickered as men surrounded the cabin fully. Lon May clutched Eli's arm so hard her nails dug through his coat. Please, please, stay behind me, he whispered. Another shout. We give you 1 minute, Dawson. 1 minute to hand the girl out, or we burn that cabin down. Whit spat. They'll do it. You know they will. Eli looked around fast. The cabin was strong but old. Walls dry as tinder. One torch thrown at the logs could turn the place into a furnace. Lon May realized the same thing. She trembled from more than cold. No, she whispered. Not fire. They burn girls who fight back. Her voice cracked on the last word. Eli's breath turned sharp. Outside, Hal called again, slow and taunting. Little bird, you fly out now, or we clip your wings with fire. Whit lifted his rifle again. I've got 5 rounds left. I've got 3, Eli said. Lon May swallowed. They have. Many more. The storm thrashed against the walls, rattling shutters, howling through chinks. But under it all, Eli heard men moving, shoveling snow into piles, dragging wood, preparing something. Preparing fire. Lon May squeezed her eyes shut. Please let me run. If I run into storm, maybe they chase me and leave you. Eli shook his head. You wouldn't last 10 minutes out there. Better than letting you die for me. Whit snorted. You think we're the kind of men who let folks die alone? Lon May's lips trembled. She didn't argue. Another crash at the window, another gunshot. Splinters flew. Whit fired back, ducking low. They're working their way to the door, he said. They'll break it soon. Eli stood, feeling the weight of the moment settle on him. They had minutes, maybe less. His breath steamed in the air as he looked between Whit and Lon May. You got a shovel? Eli asked. Whit blinked. A what? A shovel. Whit pointed to a corner. By the woodpile. Eli grabbed it. Lon May frowned. What you do with shovel? Eli jammed the metal head into the coals of the fireplace. Flames licked up the steel. Whit's eyes widened. You can't be thinking I am. That's insane, Whit said, stepping closer. You'll burn this whole place down. Eli's expression didn't change. Better we choose the fire than let them do it. Lon May's breath stopped entirely. Outside, Hal's voice came once more. Last chance. Whit stared at Eli. You sure about this? Eli nodded once. Start miracle number 2, he said quietly. Because miracle number 1 was finding her alive. He lifted the glowing shovel from the flames. The The metal sizzled. Lame whispered through trembling lips, "Eli, what you do?" He turned toward the far wall, dry, old planks soaked with years of sun and dust. "I'm giving us a way out." Then Eli swung the shovel and drove the burning steel into the wall. The cabin ignited. Fire leapt up the boards, fast and hungry. Wit swore. "Lord have mercy." Lon May covered her mouth, eyes wide with terror, but also something else. Hope. Outside, men shouted in confusion. Inside, flames crawled upward like living snakes. And Eli Dawson stepped back from the spreading blaze, eyes steady. "You boys want her?" he whispered toward the door. "Come through fire." The fire caught faster than Whit expected. Faster than Eli expected too. Dry timber, 40 years of winters and summers, went up with a hungry roar that shook the cabin walls. Flames licked along the boards in ribbons of orange, racing upward, casting wild shadows across Lon May's frightened face. Outside, shouts erupted. "What are they doing?" "They're burning it. Get to the windows now." Eli didn't wait. He grabbed Lon May's wrist. "Stay close to me. Don't breathe deep. Smoke rises fast." Whit coughed as he swung his rifle over his shoulder and grabbed a wool blanket from the floor. "Boy, you're going to be the death of me." "Better fire than knives," Eli muttered. A crack split the air, the first beam overhead giving way. Sparks rained down like shooting stars. The heat punched them in the face as flames curled along the roof supports. Lame pressed close to Eli's arm. Her voice was a small, trembling thing. You sure this good plan?" "No," Eli said honestly, "but it's the one we've got." Outside, boots pounded through the snow. Men cursed, scrambling to get angles on the windows, now bursting with smoke. More yelling rose through the storm. Confusion, panic, anger. "They don't know what we're doing," Whit said through a cough. "Good," Eli answered. "Let's keep it that way." He moved toward the back of the cabin, the part of the wall already glowing red with heat. Flames clawed their way upward, devouring the logs. Eli squinted through the smoke, eyes watering, and spotted it, the weakest point in the boards. "Whit, help me," rasped. They both slammed shoulders into the burning planks. The wood groaned, then cracked, then splintered outward into the storm. A blast of cold air punched into the cabin. Snow swirled in, mixing with the smoke. Lame gasped. Outside, they see tracks. "Not if we move fast," Eli said. He climbed through the broken wall first, boots hitting deep snow. The cold bit his skin, sharp and merciless. Lon May followed, nearly tripping as she landed. Whit came last, dragging the blanket and rifle. Behind them, the cabin roared with heat, an inferno in the storm. "Where to?" Whit shouted over the wind. Eli pointed toward a stand of pines about 50 yards away, barely visible through the blowing white. "Trees will hide us from the men circling the cabin, and the smoke's thick enough to mask our tracks for a minute or two." They staggered through the snow, half running, half stumbling. Lon May clung to Eli's arm, legs trembling, blanket trailing behind like a tattered shadow. Behind them, a voice rose over the crackle of flame and the roar of wind. "Dawson, how?" He sounded furious, confused, livid. "You think fire save you?" he shouted. "We find you. We find girl." Eli didn't look back. "Just keep moving." The trees swallowed them, dark shapes in the blizzard, branches heavy with snow. The fire's glow flickered behind them like a dying sunset. "Here," Eli said, pushing them deeper. "Stay low." They ducked behind a fallen pine. The storm did them a favor, wind whipping loose snow into the air, filling tracks almost as fast as they made them. Smoke billowed across the plains, thick and dark, blurring everything. Eli crouched beside Lon May, gripping her shoulders gently. "You okay?" Her eyes glistened. "I thought we'd die in fire." "We didn't," Eli said softly. "We'd scanned the snowy horizon. But we ain't safe. Not yet." No sooner were the words spoken than shadows moved near the burning cabin. Shapes strode through smoke and flame. Hal Lynn and his men, coughing, spinning, trying to understand what just happened. They weren't far. "One of them will start searching the tree line," Whit muttered. "Won't take long." Eli nodded. We need to move. Where? Lame whispered. Whit pointed west. My barn's half a mile that way. Big one. Thick walls. If we cut around the ridge, the wind'll cover our trail. You got horses there? Eli asked. 2. Good. Bad, Whit added. Storm spooked them. They'll be wild as devils. Eli stood. We'll handle it. But as they stepped from behind the log, a single crack split the air, a rifle shot. Snow puffed beside Whit's leg. He flinched. They saw movement. Eli grabbed Lon May and pulled her behind a cluster of pines. Move. The next shot was closer. The third whistled past Eli's ear. They're firing blind through the trees, Whit said. But blind shots still kill. Eli tightened his grip on Lon May's wrist. Stay behind me. They moved fast, weaving between pines. The wind howled, bending branches, throwing ice like shrapnel. The snow was knee-deep, sometimes thigh-deep, draining strength. Lon May stumbled once, falling to her knees. Get up, Eli whispered urgently, lifting her. Don't stop. I try. Her breath came in short, sharp bursts. My legs, they hurt. You're doing good, Eli told her, voice steady despite the storm clawing at them. Just a little farther. We kept glancing back. They're splitting up, damn it. 2 heading this way. Other 2 sweeping wide. Chin with them? Eli asked. Didn't see him. That's worse, Eli muttered. They pushed on until the trees thinned and the land dipped into a shallow valley. Winds calmer here. A dark shape rose at the far end, a barn half buried in snow, roof sagging under winter's weight. Whit pointed. That's it. They moved faster, boots crunching, breaths ragged. Eli's ribs screamed from cold and strain. Lon May stumbled again, but he kept her steady. Finally, they reached the barn. Whit yanked the door open and pushed them inside. It slammed shut behind them, muffling the storm, muffling everything. For a moment, there was only darkness, only lungs trying to catch air, only hearts pounding. Whit found a lantern and struck a match. Soft light filled the space, dust, hay, wooden stalls, shadows climbing the walls. Lon May collapsed to her knees, hands shaking violently. Eli knelt beside her. You're safe, he whispered. For now. But Lon May shook her head, eyes cloudy with fear. No, she breathed. You not understand. Eli's brow tightened. Then help me. Make me understand. She swallowed hard, voice trembling. They not chase me just because I run. Not only for that. I saw something I should not see. Whit's gaze sharpened. What? Lon May looked between them, tears welling. Men from railroad camp. They planned to kill many people. Tomorrow morning. Train full of families. Her voice broke. If I die, no one warn town. The lantern flickered. Eli felt the weight of the moment fall on his shoulders like an avalanche. How many? He asked quietly. 50. Maybe more. Whit stopped breathing altogether. Eli exhaled through his teeth. Then we're not just running from these men, he said slowly. No. Lon May whispered, gripping his coat. We run to save a train. Outside. Faint through the storm, footsteps crunched in the snow. Closer. Hunting. Searching. Whit raised the lantern just enough to see Eli's face. What now, son? Eli Dawson wiped snow from his brow. We fight if we must, he said, steady as stone. But first we think. His eyes narrowed. We still have one chance left. The barn creaked under the weight of the storm. Wind pushed against the boards, but the walls held firm. Thick timber, hand-hewn decades ago. Eli moved to the nearest crack in the wall and pressed his eye against it. Snow swirled outside. Shadows moved in the white. The hunters weren't far. 2 of them, he whispered. Maybe 30 yards out. Whit lowered the lantern until the flame dimmed. They're tracking by sound now. Storm's letting up just enough. Lon May sat beside a hay bale, blanket wrapped tight, breath trembling. She lifted her eyes toward Eli. They will not stop. Not until they find me. Eli turned from the window. They won't find you. You can't promise that, she whispered. I can. His voice left no room for doubt. You're alive because I found you. You'll stay alive because we're not done. Whit huffed. You say that like you've got a plan. I do. Eli pointed upward. The loft. Whit frowned. The loft. Son, that's nothing but old boards and dust. Exactly, Eli said. They'll tear this barn apart looking on the ground. They won't think to check the rafters. Not with smoke from the cabin still blowing this way. Whit nodded slowly. Might buy us time. Lon May looked at the ladder leading up. Narrow, rickety, half covered in cobwebs. I can climb, she said softly, but my legs. Eli stepped forward. I'll help you. Bootsteps outside made all three of them freeze. Close. Right outside the barn door. Whit leaned toward the lantern flame and blew it out. Darkness swallowed the barn. They were left with only faint light leaking through cracks in the walls. Thin lines of silver cutting across hay and dust. The handle jiggled. Lon May covered her mouth to keep from crying out. Another voice whispered through the door. Tracks end here. Eli felt his heartbeat slow, steady, controlled. Fear sharpened his senses, but didn't drown him. He reached for Lon May's hand. She clung to him like her life depended on it, and it did. Whit whispered, up the ladder. Now. Eli guided Lon May toward the rungs. The wood creaked softly as he helped her climb. Every sound felt too loud, too sharp, too likely to betray them. Whit followed, climbing after them, moving with surprising silence for a man his age. Below them, the barn door shook as someone tested the latch. Eli and Whit flattened themselves in the loft shadows, pulling Lon May close between stacks of hay. Dust drifted through the air, illuminated by faint cracks of moonlight bleeding through the roof. Then, with a sound like splintering bone, the barn door burst open. Snow poured in with the wind. Two men stepped inside, silhouetted by the storm behind them, rifles in hand. Eli recognized one of them. Not Hal Lynn, but one of Hal's lieutenants, sharp-faced, ice-cold, eyes like a starving wolf. They moved slow, deliberate, searching. Dawson's horse is outside, the sharp-faced one muttered. Fresh tracks. Where'd he go then? The other asked. Could be hiding in the stalls. They stalked forward, boots crunching on the frozen ground. One kicked open a stall door. Empty. The next. Empty. Their breath steamed in the cold air. Above, Lon May trembled. Eli tightened his grip on her arm. Don't move, he breathed. Whit gripped his rifle, muzzle pointed downward through a gap in the boards. Eli put a hand over the barrel, shaking his head. Not yet. Below them, the men reached the center of the barn, directly beneath the loft. The sharp-faced one paused. He lifted his lantern and stared upward. Right at them. Eli held his breath. The man squinted. The lantern flame flickered, casting light up the beams. Whit's rifle tensed. Lon May's breath stilled. Then the man grunted and looked away. Dust, he said. Nobody been up there in years. The other man snorted. This storm making you jumpy. Shut up and keep looking. They moved on. Whit slowly exhaled. Eli's shoulders eased by an inch. But then, a sharp crack echoed through the barn. Outside, another voice. Hal Lynn's. Barn first. If they're hiding, smoke them out. Smoke. Lon May's hand clamped Eli's arm like a vice. They burn barns too, she whispered. Not just cabins. Whit closed his eyes. Blast it all. Eli moved quickly, crawling across the loft toward the back wall. There's a second door, he said. Small one. Used for feed deliveries years back. Whit frowned. It'll be frozen shut. Then we break it. Lon May scrambled after him. Outside is open field. I know. You will be seen. I know. Then why go? She whispered. Eli turned. Firelight flickered faintly through the barn slats. Men walking outside with torches. Because if we sit still, we die, Eli said. Whit grabbed his arm. Boy, we go out that door, we run straight into him. No, Eli said quietly. We don't run straight. We run smart. He pointed toward the tree line beyond the barn, barely visible through swirling snow. Winds shifting east. Our tracks will blow shut fast. We get 10 steps, maybe 15 before they see us. That's enough. Whit nodded slowly. Enough to vanish. Exactly. Lon May looked between them. You too run all life. Whit chuckled under his breath. Only when trouble knocks first. Below them, the two men finished their sweep of the barn. Sharpface called out, Nobody in here. Then burn it. Hal shouted from outside. Lon May gasped. We have to go. Eli moved to the loft edge and dropped quietly into a hay pile below. Whit followed. Then he lifted Lame down, catching her by the waist. She shivered against him, but not from the cold. "Stay close," he whispered. They crossed the barn silently, boots muffled in the hay. Whit pulled the small rear door. It groaned, loud in the tense quiet. Eli froze. Bootsteps outside paused. Lame swallowed, barely breathing. Whit pressed his shoulder to the door and leaned with all his strength. The ice cracked. The hinges screamed. Then the door popped open. Cold wind blasted them. "Go!" Eli hissed. They ran into the storm, snow swallowing their footsteps, wind, dragging their scents away. Behind them, Hal Lin's voice erupted in rage. "They're running. After them." Lame stumbled, but Eli caught her. Whit shouted left, toward the ridge. Eli pushed Lame ahead of him. "Keep going. Don't look back." But Lame didn't obey. She heard something. Through the storm. Through the wind. Chen's voice. "Close. Little bird. I find you." Lame's blood turned to ice. Eli grabbed her hand tighter, pulling her into the teeth of the storm. And behind them, the barn burst into flame, lighting the night in orange fury. They ran into darkness. But the devil chasing them did not slow. Not for snow. Not for fire. Not for anything. The storm howled across the open ridge, turning the world into a blur of white and shadow. Eli kept May's hand locked in his, pulling her forward as fast as her shaking legs could move. Whit followed behind, breathing hard, clutching his rifle as the burning barn cast an orange glow against the sky. Every few seconds, Eli glanced back. Shadows moved behind the flames. Shapes broke free from the firelight. "Men. Hunting. They're spreading out," Whit rasped. "How sending 2 east, 1 west. They'll sweep the ridge." May stumbled, catching herself on Eli's arm. Her breath came in short, choking bursts. I slow you down." "No," Eli said harshly. "You stay with us." She tried again. "They want only me." Eli stopped dead, spun, and gripped her shoulders. The storm whipped her hair across her face, but she held his gaze. "I didn't save you in the snow, just to hand you back to devils," he said softly. "Don't ask me again." Her eyes shimmered. She nodded. Whit pointed toward a dark line stretching across the ridge. A narrow depression, almost invisible in the storm. Dry Creek, cuts down toward the railroad. "Could hide us if we keep low." Eli nodded. "Go." They scrambled down the bank, boots slipping on ice. The creek offered a moment of shelter from the wind, walls rising on both sides like protective arms. Snow drifted inside, but the storm above mostly passed overhead. For the first time since the cabin, Eli could breathe. May pressed her back against the frozen bank, gasping. Her thin blanket was stiff with frost. Eli knelt in front of her, touching her hands. They were icy, trembling uncontrollably. He rubbed them fast, trying to coax warmth back. "You warm enough to walk?" "I must be," she whispered. Whit crouched near them. "Tracks will be covered in minutes, but their eyes won't be fooled long. We need distance." Eli nodded. "We head south. Telegraph stations still our goal." Whit raised a brow. "In this storm? That's a hard run." Lame leaned forward. "If train not warned, they all die." Eli's jaw tightened. "Then we get the message through. Storm or no storm." Before Whit could answer, a single sound froze all 3 of them. A twig snapped. "Close." Eli's hand went to his pistol. Whit lifted his rifle. May covered her mouth. Another crunch of snow. "Steady. Slow." Footsteps descending the creek. Eli pressed a finger to his lips. They crouched lower, breathing shallow, listening as the footsteps drew nearer. A silhouette appeared above the bank, just a dark outline, moving with careful steps. Not rushing, not stumbling. This was a hunter who knew exactly what he was doing. Whit whispered, "That ain't How. How stomps like a bull." May's trembling intensified. It might be Chun. Eli's stomach tightened. If it was Chun, 1 man was worse than 5. A shape moved closer, still just a shadow. The snow muffled almost everything, but Eli could hear the man's breathing. Calm, unhurried, like he already knew where they were. Then, a voice drifted down the bank. Soft, Smooth. Deadly. Little bird. Lon May's knees nearly buckled. Eli grabbed her arm before she collapsed. Chen stepped into view. He wasn't tall in the way Hal was. He wasn't loud. He wasn't snarling. Instead, he moved with a slow, patient grace, the kind that made Eli's skin crawl. His burned coat hung open, charred on the shoulder. Snowflakes melted on his scarred hands. On one hand, just as Lon May had warned, a red dragon tattoo coiled across the knuckles. And he was smiling. Always running, Chen said softly. Always making me chase. Eli stood slowly, placing himself between Chun and Lon May. His pistol lifted an inch. Chun tilted his head, amused. Cowboy, you bleed from ribs. You shake from cold. And yet, you stand in my way again. Eli said nothing. Chun took another step. Give me the girl. I end you quick. Lon May clutched Eli's coat. Don't. Please don't. Wit stepped out from behind them, rifle leveled. You take one more step, friend, and I'll put a hole in your chest I can see daylight through. Chun smiled wider. Old man, you shake worse than girl. Wit didn't lower the rifle. Try me. The snow muffled the next moment, stretching it out like a held breath. Then Chun lifted his hand. A signal. Behind him, two more figures rose from the bank. Guns ready. Eyes cold. Eli's blood went ice cold. They were surrounded. Wit whispered, that's it then. Lon May's voice cracked. Eli, I can go with them. If I go, they let you live. Quiet, Eli whispered. Chun held up a hand to silence his men. I only want little bird. Eli tightened his jaw. No. Chun blinked, annoyed by the simple word. No, you're not taking her. Chun sighed. Cowboy, you think yourself hero. But heroes bleed same as others. Wit whispered to Eli, two behind him, two on the ridge. They got sights on us. Eli knew. He also knew he had only two choices. Fight and die here. Or find something insane enough to shift the odds. Then, a sound cut the cold. A distant whistle. Lon May gasped. Train early? Eli's heart jumped. Or storm slowed it. Chen's eyes flicked southward. The tattooed hand curled into a fist. You send warning. You doom everything. Snow gusted through the creek. The men above steadied their guns. Eli whispered to Wit, when I move, go left. Wit whispered back, what move? Eli didn't answer. He looked at Lon May. Her eyes were wet, her breath shaking, her entire body trembling with cold and terror. But she met his gaze with something else. Trust. Eli squeezed her hand. Stay behind me. Shin took a step forward. Give me the girl. Eli inhaled once. Slow. Deep. Then he said, no. He grabbed the nearest thing within reach, a frozen branch half buried in the snow, and hurled it upward into the swirling white. The men on the ridge flinched. Guns lifted. Wit fired first, his shot lighting the creek. The bullet hit the man on the right. He toppled sideways into the snow. Eli shoved Lon May hard behind a jutting boulder and fired twice, forcing the other ridge gunman to duck. Chun lunged forward with terrifying speed. Eli met him head-on. They crashed into the snow, a tangle of fists and elbows and blood. The knife in Chin's left hand flashed inches from Eli's throat. Wit fired again, dropping one of the flanking men. But the last gunman charged Wit, slamming him into the creek wall. Lon May screamed. Eli saw Chin's blade rise for a killing strike. He couldn't reach his gun, couldn't lift his arm, couldn't do anything except one thing. He drove his knee upward, smashing it into Chin's burned shoulder. Chun howled, collapsing to the side. Eli rolled, gasping for breath, hand reaching for his pistol buried in the snow. Chun kicked it away. They crashed together again, locked in the cold, fighting for inches, for air, for life. Lon May crawled toward Wit, who was pinned under the last gunman. She grabbed a rock from the snow and slammed it into the man's temple with a desperate cry. The man staggered. Wit rammed his rifle, but into the attacker's face. He dropped. Only Chun remained. Chun, who rose from the snow like a devil reborn. Blood dripped down his arm. His breath misted the air. His eyes burned with promise. This ends now, Chun hissed. Eli staggered to his feet. Yeah, he said. It does. Snow whipped across the ridge as Eli and Chun faced each other, two figures carved out of pain and cold and bruised survival. The storm had softened, but the wind still carried their breath away in ragged clouds. Whit leaned against the creek wall, clutching his ribs, blood smearing his beard. Lon May crouched beside him, trembling but alive, eyes locked on Eli. Chin's dragon-tattooed hand curled into a fist. The red ink glowed like fire under the snowfall. "You are stubborn man," Chin whispered, stepping forward, knife in hand. "You fight for girl not yours. For people not yours." "Why?" Eli wiped blood from his mouth, breath shaking. "Because someone has to." Chun tilted his head, amused. "Cowboy wants to be a hero." "No," Eli said quietly. "I just don't want devils like you walking free." Chun lunged. Eli barely dodged the first strike. The knife sliced the air, grazing his coat. Eli stumbled backward through the snow, boots slipping on hidden ice. Chun came again, faster, brutal, practiced. He punched the knife downward, aiming for Eli's ribs. Eli caught Chin's wrist with both hands, muscles screaming as metal hovered inches from his side. They wrestled in the snow, boots digging grooves in the drift. Chin's strength was frightening, cold, controlled, unrelenting. "You die for girl who mean nothing," Chin growled. "Maybe," Eli rasped, "but she's breathing because of me. And 50 people on that train might breathe tomorrow too." Chun snarled and twisted, slamming Eli hard into the icy ground. Pain exploded through Eli's back. Snow filled his vision. Chin knelt on his chest, knife rising. Lon May screamed his name. Would try to lift his rifle, but his arms shook too violently. Eli's hands scrabbled in the snow, searching. Anything, any weapon, any hope. His fingers brushed something. Cold metal. The lantern hook from Whit's barn, torn loose during the fight, half buried in the drift. Chin saw Eli's eyes shift. He smiled, victorious. "Too slow, cowboy." He brought the knife down. Eli acted on pure instinct. He grabbed the hook and swung upward hard. The curved metal slammed into Chin's burned shoulder. Chun howled, collapsing sideways, the knife slipping from his grasp. Eli rolled, gasping, pain ripping through every rib. He staggered to his feet, legs shaking like winter branches. Chun rose too, one hand clutching his wounded shoulder. Snowflakes melted on his burning skin. His eyes no longer calm. Now they burned with animal fury. "You die first," Chin hissed. "Then girl." Lon May stood, tears freezing on her cheeks. "No!" Chun charged. Eli didn't retreat this time. He met the rush head-on. They collided like rams on a mountain slope. Eli drove the hook across Chin's face. Chun slammed his elbow into Eli's throat. Eli grabbed Chin's burned coat, yanked him forward, and slammed his forehead into the bridge of Chin's nose. The crack was sickening. Chin stumbled back, blood pouring down his face. But he didn't fall. Not yet. "You cannot kill me," Chun groaned, staggering forward again. "I survive everything." Eli spit blood. "Not this." He stepped aside just as Chun lunged, and Chin slipped on the hidden ice beneath the snow. His foot shot out from under him. He toppled backward, crashing hard into a jagged shelf of frozen rock at the edge of the creek. The sound was final. Chun lay still. One hand twitched. The dragon tattoo glistened red. Then it stopped moving at all. Silence settled over the ridge. The storm eased to a whisper. Eli stood over Chun, chest heaving, breath tearing at his throat. The world spun. His knees buckled, but Lon May rushed to him, catching his arm. "Eli, Eli, you hurt," she whispered, voice shaking. "I'm okay," he breathed, though he wasn't sure. "You?" She nodded, tears streaking her. Frostbitten cheeks. "You saved me again." Whit finally reached them, leaning heavily on his rifle. "Storm's dying. We gotta move before more of Chin's boys show up." Eli let out a slow breath, looking south, toward the railroad, toward the last hope for the train. "Can you walk, Eli?" Whit asked. "Walk. I can run," Eli whispered. Lon May shook her head. You bleed." Eli smiled faintly. "I've bled worse." Whit snorted. "That's a lie and you know it." But Eli pushed forward anyway. The telegraph station. They reached the telegraph station just as dawn broke over the snow-covered plains, painting the world in pale gold. Eli nearly collapsed at the door, but Lon May steadied him. Inside, the place was empty, storm abandoned, hearth cold, but the equipment intact. Whit moved to the stove and lit a flame. Get some heat in your bones. Lon May pulled off her gloves and sat at the telegraph key. Her fingers trembled. She flexed them once, twice, breath slow and steady. Ready? Eli asked softly. She nodded. Tap, tap. Tap, tap, tap. Tap. The message went out. Urgent, desperate, clear. Stop train. Bridge explosives. 50 lives at risk. Act now. Then she sent it again. And again. And again. Come on, Whit muttered. Come on. Minutes crawled. Then, the telegraph clicked back. Message received. Train stopped. Marshals en route. Lon May exhaled a sob of relief and covered her face with her hands. Eli sagged into a chair. Whit laughed, a tired, broken sound. We did it. Lon May turned and wrapped her arms tightly around Eli, tears falling warm against his neck. You saved them, she whispered. All those families. All those people. You saved them. Eli shook his head. We saved them. All of us. Aftermath. By mid-morning, federal marshals arrived on horseback, tracking the smoke and the telegraph message. They took statements, examined Chin's body and the bodies of his men, and promised protection for Lon May. They offered Eli a reward he didn't expect. He didn't care about reward, but he cared about the cattle he'd lost, the ranch he'd nearly given up on. So he accepted. Lon May stayed with the marshals at first, safe, warm, finally free. Weeks later, she settled in the nearby town of Snow Bend, where she worked at a small laundry owned by kind-hearted locals. Sometimes she joined church gatherings, sometimes she practiced her handwriting at the library, always trying to build a new life. And Eli, he visited often, never for long, never with fanfare, but always with quiet steadiness. Whit said it best one evening, watching Eli brush snow off his coat before walking into town. You two ain't done with each other, he muttered. Not by half. Eli didn't argue. Months later, winter came again. Snow fell soft and slow over the plains. Eli stood on the ridge outside town, watching flakes drift across the frozen ground. Lon May joined him, wrapped in a new coat given by the marshals' wives. You think of day you found me, she asked gently. Every time it snows, Eli said. Lon May looked up at him, eyes warm despite the cold. You gave your last blanket for me. Eli smiled softly. Worth it. They stood together in the quiet, the past drifting away like snowflakes on the wind. The world was still dangerous, still hard, still wild. But some choices, some sacrifices, changed everything. And Eli Dawson had made his peace with that. If you felt this tale in your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Wild West Emotional Tales, where every story rides through the dust, the danger, and the kind of love that never dies. See you in the next tale, partner.